Hello, dear friends. Today we will read the memoirs of Heinrich Mittelmann, a member of the Hitler Youth and an artilleryman in the 22nd German Tank Division. His memoirs cover the period of the German advance on Stalingrad, where he describes not only the fierce fighting, but also the terrible face of war. Well, let's get started. What seemed incomprehensible was the lack of any serious resistance from the Russians, apart from a few local skirmishes that took place on a daily basis. At the very last moment, the Ivans somehow managed to slip away from us, and we could not figure out the true motives behind this systematic retreat. Whether it was weakness or a cunning maneuver. We were also struck by the fact that when we reached the industrial centers of the Donbass, all the valuable equipment of numerous plants and factories had been dismantled and taken deep into the country, probably to the Urals or further. Whatever our Führer claimed, we sensed in our gut that Joseph Stalin was not exhausted, that he still had enough strength to annoy us. And seeing our so-called Wirtschaftsführers, whom malicious tongues called the vultures of Krupp, Tyson, and Siemens, just shaking their heads at the sight of the empty factory floors, we felt something like schadenfreude. The days were fine. The ground had dried out completely. In short, ideal conditions had been created for the lightning-fast advance of our mechanized forces. Our division formed a tank wedge that rapidly advanced deep into Russian territory, and we rushed forward without paying much attention to what was happening on the right and left. The infantry divisions following us would figure it out. That was their job. Sometimes we conducted reconnaissance in force, that is, we carried out rapid tank operations with relatively small groups of vehicles, 3 to 4 tanks. Once, during such an operation, we rushed through dug-in dugouts, catching the Russians by surprise. If they had come out to us with their hands up, no one would have touched them, but they started to scatter like frightened hares, and the bullets from our machine guns were faster. Among the dead, we found 2 young women, and we also captured 3 prisoners. Upon entering the dugout, we realized that we had stumbled upon a propaganda unit. There were stacks of posters, leaflets, and brochures everywhere. We burned most of them, immediately building a fire, but took some with us to show to the command. The leaflets featured caricatures of Hitler, Goering, and Goebbels, and the artists were clearly not lacking in talent. In any case, they turned out to be very funny. When we showed these caricatures to our comrades, they rolled with laughter. But then, one of the officers rushed over and took them away from us. Our mood was as optimistic as could be. We believed in Paulus with all our hearts and had no doubt that victory was near. But on the approaches to the industrial center, a city called Izium, located on the Donets River, we unexpectedly encountered fierce resistance from the Russians. Rumors spread that so-called workers' battalions had been thrown against us, and from past experience we knew that this did not bode well for us. My tank was out of action due to a breakdown, and I was put behind the wheel of a half-track tractor equipped with a 5-centimeter anti-tank gun. On the way, the platoon commander usually sat next to me, while the crew, the gunner, loader, and ammunition carrier, jolted around in the back. We quickly set up a position on a hillside above the city. The location was ideal, and I was still wondering how the Russians had let us get so close. The sight was truly breathtaking. As we made our way through the maze of city streets, Russian T-34 tanks were advancing on us, and quite a few of them. They were about a kilometer away. From time to time, they stopped to fire at us with their powerful guns. A flash in the distance. Then, a couple of seconds later, an explosion somewhere nearby, accompanied by the screech of flying shrapnel. The tanks were followed by infantry in strange, dark, almost black uniforms, apparently factory workers who had been thrown into battle in their overalls. Letting them get as close as possible, we opened fire. Shells from our tanks, located in the rear, whistled heartbreakingly over our heads. The battle lasted about 2 hours. The Soviets, as always, fought heroically, but we had a clear advantage in both numbers and combat equipment. Of course, our high morale, the result of successful offensives in recent weeks, and of course, our positional advantage, also played a role. In short, the Russians had no chance of emerging victorious from this battle. Clouds of black smoke rose into the blue summer sky from burning Russian tanks and houses set on fire by our shells. The entire slope was littered with wounded and dead enemy soldiers. The few remaining undamaged tanks hastily retreated, completing the solemn and somewhat tragic picture of our absolute and complete victory in battle. We could almost physically feel the confusion of the defeated enemy, who had tried to defend their city and were now forced to retreat under our onslaught. Looking at all this, I imagined what I would feel if I were in the Russians' place. Of course, nothing but anger and rage at the tanks mercilessly firing at them. One of our artillerymen began waving at the tankers, urging them to cease fire. "Don't shoot at someone who's down," he said. We slowly moved towards the city. The infantry followed close behind us, and one of our officers quickly organized the collection of the wounded, which brought some peace to our souls. The stubborn city of Izium was taken, and we, having crossed the Donets, came close to the large bend of the full-flowing Don. The Soviets could do nothing to stop us, and beyond the Don flowed one of the greatest rivers in Europe, the Volga, with Stalingrad located on its western bank. Our officers tirelessly repeated to us that reaching and capturing this city was the ultimate goal of our summer offensive. We believed this and hoped for a long-awaited rest after a successful advance to the Volga. On the same day, we left Izium and turned southeast, heading for the largest industrial center of the North Caucasus, Rostov-on-Don. As we approached a village that lay in our path, we fired our cannons, just for fun, as our gunner put it. The target was a house barely visible behind the bushes. As we got closer, we noticed many fruit trees with the first apples turning green on their branches. Deciding to replenish and diversify our diet, it was decided that I would go into the garden and fill the ammunition boxes with apples, while the others would wait for me in the tractor a short distance away. As I approached the house, I suddenly heard sobbing. Passing through the gate, I noticed a girl of about 12 lying on the grass in a light summer dress with short sleeves. Her light hair was braided into pigtails. The entire left side of her body was a bloody mess. The child's body was twitching in death throes. With her back to me, a woman, obviously the mother, was leaning over the dying child. She was crying and repeating the girl's name over and over. Hearing footsteps, she turned abruptly, and I saw her tear-stained face, contorted with grief. A broken plate and sliced bread lay on the grass nearby. The mother slowly straightened up and, realizing who was in front of her, changed in an instant. Her sorrowful expression was replaced by hatred. Looking at me with eyes narrowed in anger, she spoke. I didn't understand everything, but what I did understand hit me like a backhand blow. Despite my feigned and instilled Nazi arrogance towards the population of the occupied countries, I was instantly overcome with guilt. I had been in difficult situations before, but this one was incomparable to any of them. "I'm sorry," was all I could manage to mumble, but I immediately realized how inappropriate that word was. "I'm sorry?" the woman repeated. "And you're asking for forgiveness for that?" she exclaimed indignantly. "For everything you've done?" "She just wanted to meet you, but that takes courage. And you coward, you scoundrel, what was your response?" I didn't know how to react. And, like a true coward, I ran away from that garden, away from that house, wanting only one thing: to get back to my friends as quickly as possible. I jumped into the driver's seat, started the car, and sped away toward the center of the village, where the rest of our group was already gathering. I told my comrades what had happened, and why I had returned without apples and even without the ammunition box. They listened to me without interrupting once. "So what?" one of them asked when I fell silent. "Big deal. A fragment of our shell killed a Russian girl. You'd better explain why you didn't bring any apples." We were settling down to rest under the branches of the trees in the village when I suddenly noticed corpses lying nearby on the road and asked my comrades how it had happened. Well, how did it happen? We were approaching one of the houses when a mother with 2 children jumped right out in front of us. You understand. I understood. I understood very well. And I didn't go near the corpses, neither did the others. Then our captain appeared, smiling from ear to ear, and thanked us for an excellent and successful attack, for recapturing another village from the Russians for the Führer and the fatherland. Shortly after that, we entered a small town called Komsomolsk, where we set up camp in the city garden, or, as it was called under the Soviets, the Park of Culture and Recreation. Many of the cities we passed through in our tanks had similar parks, usually recently established. They said it was a new, post-revolutionary custom introduced by the communists in every city in the country. Personally, I found this difficult to understand, as we had been taught that communists were only capable of destroying culture. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all soon.